600 million board feet of lumber disappeared into the Nevada desert between 1860 and 1880. Not burned, not shipped, buried. The Comstock lode mines swallowed entire forests into chambers 1,000 feet underground, entombed in darkness forever. This wasn't waste. It was the price of the richest silver strike in American history. Without those wooden honeycombs holding back a mountain, the whole boom collapses in 1860. The conventional story says the Wild West was built on 6-shooters and cattle drives. The evidence says it was built on invisible timber grids designed by a German engineer who refused to make a single dollar from his invention. Here's what the mining ledgers actually show. One man's engineering drawings, sketched in November 1860, unlocked $400 million in ore that was physically impossible to extract before he arrived. The rock was too soft. The chambers were too wide. Every traditional mining method had failed. Philip Deidesheimer looked at a beehive and saw the solution. His square-set timbering system became the standard for deep mining worldwide, and he gave it away for free. April 1860. Virginia City, Nevada Territory. The Ophir Mine, 50 feet down. The silver vein is 10 feet wide at this depth, and it's making men rich. Assays are coming back at $3,000 per ton when silver trades at $1.60 an ounce. That's extraordinary wealth concentrated in blue-black rock that miners initially cursed as worthless clay. The problem isn't the ore. The problem is physics. By October, at the 180-foot level, that 10-foot vein has swollen to 40 feet wide in places, 50 feet in others. The rock isn't hard granite. It's decomposed porphyry mixed with clay that swells when exposed to air, exerting pressure that snaps 12-inch timbers like kindling. The traditional mining solution, leave pillars of ore to hold up the ceiling, won't work because the ore itself is too soft to support its own weight. Splice together shorter timbers with iron bolts and bars. The frames buckle and collapse within days under the superincumbent pressure. Cave-ins are killing miners monthly. The Ophir's trustees face an impossible choice: abandon the richest silver deposit ever discovered in America, or find an engineer who can solve a problem no one has solved before. W.F. Babcock, trustee of the Ophir mine, knows exactly who to summon. Philip Deidesheimer, 28 years old, educated at the prestigious Freiburg Mining Academy in Germany, working mines in Georgetown, California. Deidesheimer arrives in April 1860. Some accounts say November, the records conflict, and descends into the Ophir to examine the disaster unfolding at depth. What he sees: timbers crushed into splinters by swelling clay, chambers that need to span 40 feet with no pillars, ore bodies extending in 3 dimensions with no predictable boundaries, heat rising past 90 degrees at the 200-foot level, climbing toward 110 at deeper stations yet to be dug, water seeping through fractured rock, and everywhere the constant threat of collapse that could kill dozens of men in seconds. Deidesheimer spends weeks underground, measuring, calculating, watching how the mountain moves. He's looking for a structural principle that can scale infinitely in any direction, use readily available materials, and resist crushing pressures that increase exponentially with depth. The solution comes from biology: honeycomb. Deidesheimer sketches interlocking cubes made of 18 by 18-inch timbers, mortised together at the joints. Each cube is 6 to 7 feet tall, 4 to 6 feet wide. Stack them vertically, extend them horizontally, build them in any configuration the ore body demands. The individual timbers can be cut to standard lengths from Sierra Nevada forests and hauled to the mine. The cubes can be assembled underground by crews working in different chambers simultaneously. Most critically, the structure distributes weight across the entire grid, rather than concentrating stress on individual supports. When pressure threatens to crush one cube, the load transfers to adjacent cubes in 6 directions. The system can expand as miners hollow out ore, filling empty cubes with waste rock to create pillars of timber and rubble that support thousands of tons overhead. It's modular, it's adaptable. It works with the mountain's forces rather than fighting them. The implementation requires precision carpentry in brutal conditions. Underground at 200 feet, temperatures hover near 100 degrees. Humidity approaches saturation from groundwater seepage. Miners work by candlelight, fitting mortise joints that must be tight enough to prevent shifting under pressure, but loose enough to assemble without power tools. A miscut timber wastes hours of labor and material that's already been hauled 40 miles from the Sierra slopes. The carpenters building these frameworks are skilled tradesmen earning premium wages, $4 to $6 per day, when surface laborers make $2. They're cutting and fitting structural members that will bear thousands of pounds, working in spaces where a collapse means death with no warning. The square sets must go up as fast as miners excavate ore, maintaining a moving perimeter between extracted chambers and untouched rock. Fall behind, and miners work without protection under loose ground. Push ahead too fast, and you're installing timber in areas where the ore hasn't been assessed. The logistics are exacting. Each level needs slightly different cube dimensions as chambers widen or narrow following ore bodies. The system is standard but never identical. Every installation is custom adapted to local geology while maintaining the structural principles that make load distribution work. By late 1860, square-set timbering is holding open chambers in the Ophir that would have been physically impossible to mine 6 months earlier. The method spreads to every mine on the Comstock within a year. The Gould and Curry, the Savage, the Hale and Norcross, the Yellow Jacket, all adopt Deidesheimer's innovation because there is no alternative. The scale of adoption reveals the desperation. In 1861, the Comstock boasts 75 ore mills with 1,200 ore-crushing stamps. Silver production that year, $2,275,000, equivalent to $56 million in 2010 purchasing power. By 1862, production nearly triples to $6 million annually. The boom is vertical. Shafts sink past 400 feet, past 600, eventually past 1,000. Every level requires square-set timbering to prevent catastrophic collapse. The deeper they dig, the more timber they need. The more timber they need, the more the Sierra forests bleed. Deidesheimer refuses to patent square-set timbering. This decision costs him millions. Some sources claim he could have made a fortune equivalent to the output of major mines. Why give it away? German mining tradition emphasized shared knowledge and professional ethics over individual profit. Deidesheimer wanted the innovation adopted widely and quickly. Patents would slow deployment through legal battles and licensing negotiations while miners died in collapses. His choice means every mine operator on the Comstock can immediately implement the system without payment or permission. The economic impact, the Comstock's timber consumption becomes the largest in American mining history. 600 million board feet of lumber over 20 years, according to contemporary accounts. Another source claims 750 million, 2 million cords of firewood to run steam engines in mines and mills. For context, one board foot is 12 inches by 12 inches by 1 inch. 600 million board feet is enough to build a solid wooden wall 6 feet high and 12 inches thick, stretching from Virginia City to San Francisco, 300 miles. Instead, it goes into the mountain and never comes out. The square-set chambers remain entombed at depth, still standing in sealed sections a century later when explorers with modern lighting equipment descend to 800-foot levels and find timber as sound as the day it was installed. The timber doesn't come from Virginia City. The high desert around Mount Davidson offers only scrubby pinyon pine, useless for structural support. The source is Lake Tahoe, 40 miles west over the Sierra Nevada. Jeffrey pine, sugar pine, white fir, trees 5 feet in diameter, 100 feet tall, growing at elevations between 4,000 and 7,000 feet. The logging operation becomes an industrial marvel in its own right. Crews fell trees, trim them to size, and send them down V-shaped flumes, 2 boards joined at 90 degrees, supported on trestles, gravity-fed with running water. Timber 16 inches square and 40 feet long rides the flumes at speeds that make them deadly to workers who attempt the journey down. The flumes stretch tens of miles. The Carson and Tahoe Lumber and Fluming Company operates a 12-mile flume from Spooner Summit to a lumber yard near Carson City, half a mile wide, a mile long. From there, the Virginia and Truckee Railroad hauls timber 21 miles to Virginia City. In 1879, Nevada's Surveyor General reports 10 major flumes with a combined length of 80 miles, transporting 33 million board feet annually, plus 171,000 cords of wood. That's just 1 year. Multiply across 2 decades. The economics of the timber supply chain reveal the scale of the operation. Logging crews at Lake Tahoe work 6-day weeks, felling trees year-round except when winter snowpack makes access impossible. The timber cruisers who mark trees for cutting are selecting for specific characteristics: straight grain, minimal rot, diameter between 18 and 36 inches. Too small won't bear the load. Too large is difficult to maneuver through flumes and mine shafts. The sawmills at Spooner Summit and Glenbrook run multiple shifts, converting logs to dimensional lumber at rates measured in hundreds of thousands of board feet weekly. The V-flumes themselves are engineering projects comparable to the mines. 135,000 board feet of lumber per mile of flume construction, according to contemporary engineering reports. That's timber that goes into building the delivery system before a single board reaches the mines. The flume riders, men who actually travel down the chutes in makeshift boats, face mortality rates comparable to miners. Water flows fast enough to propel 40-foot timbers at speeds that can kill on impact with flume walls or other obstacles. Some companies forbid the practice. Workers do it anyway because a Saturday night ride down to the valley beats a 12-mile walk after a 6-day week in the timber camps. The whole system is an industrial supply chain operating at scale unprecedented in American forestry. Nothing in California's gold rush logging compares. Nothing in eastern lumber operations matches the intensity of vertical integration, from standing timber to mine support in a matter of weeks across terrain that makes traditional transport impossible. The environmental cost is staggering. Contemporary writer William Wright, working under the pen name Dan DeQuille, documents the devastation in 1876. The Comstock lode may truthfully be said to be the tomb of the Sierras. Millions upon millions of feet of lumber are annually buried in the mines, never more to be resurrected. When once it is planted in the lower levels, it never again sees the light of day. For a distance of 50 or 60 miles, all the hills of the eastern slope of the Sierras have been to a great extent denuded of trees of every kind. Those suitable only for wood as well, those fit for the manufacture of lumber for use in the mines. Modern forestry studies confirm that logging removed 67% of the Lake Tahoe Basin's forests by 1900. In some watersheds, nearly every tree fell to Comstock saws. The Carson and Tahoe Lumber and Fluming Company's last order ships in September 1898. By then, there's nothing left to cut. The company dissolves in 1947, its timberlands sold off or donated to the state. Square-set timbering doesn't eliminate danger. It reduces it. The Yellow Jacket mine proves this on the morning of April 7, 1869. Fire breaks out at the 800-foot level. Cause disputed, possibly from a candle igniting dry timber, possibly from friction in machinery, possibly from smoldering timbers that reignited after an earlier blaze. The Yellow Jacket connects underground to the Crown Point and Kentuck mines for ventilation. When timber collapses at the 900-foot level near the Kentuck boundary, fresh oxygen rushes in, and the fire explodes. The blast of superheated air and carbon monoxide roars through interconnected tunnels, snuffing candles, choking miners in total darkness. The shift is changing when it happens. Fewer men underground than during full operations. Still, at least 35 die. Some sources say more, but bodies are never recovered, and single workers may have vanished without record. Firefighters descend, but smoke and flames drive them back. Mine operators seal off the burning levels. The fire smolders for years, temperatures so high that when crews eventually reopen sealed sections, they find chambers still too hot to enter. The Yellow Jacket disaster becomes the deadliest mining accident in Nevada history. It's a failure of fire prevention, not structural engineering. The square-set timbering held. The timber burned. That's the trade-off. Wooden support strong enough to hold a mountain can also fuel an inferno that turns mines into cremation chambers. Virginia City's population explodes from 4,500 in 1862 to 25,000 in 1874. The Nevada Territory becomes a state in 1864, despite lacking the constitutional population requirement, because the Union needs the Comstock silver to finance the Civil War. The mines produce $14 million in gold and $21 million in silver in 1877 alone. The peak year, equivalent to roughly $670 million in modern purchasing power from a single year's extraction. Total production from 1860 to 1880, nearly 7 million tons of ore. The value estimates range from $320 million to $400 million in period currency, depending on which ledgers you trust. That's 4 to 5 billion in modern equivalent. Some calculations suggest over $1 trillion in purchasing power impact. The wealth finances San Francisco's reconstruction after the 1906 earthquake, bankrolls railroad construction across the West, creates mining millionaires whose names still echo: Mackay, Fair, Flood, O'Brien, Hearst. The silver transforms Nevada from desert territory to economic powerhouse. It also transforms mining engineering worldwide. Deidesheimer's square-set system becomes the international standard for deep mining through the early 20th century. The method is taught at mining schools in Europe, South America, Australia. Versions of it still stabilize underground chambers today, adapted with steel and concrete but conceptually identical. Distribute load across a three-dimensional grid, scale infinitely, adapt to irregular ore bodies. Deidesheimer's later career is a study in contrasts. He becomes superintendent of the Ophir mine in 1875, running the operation he saved 15 years earlier. He designs mills and smelters, including Montana's Hope Mill. The mining camp built around that mill is named Phillipsburg in his honor. He invests heavily in mining stocks during the late 1870s boom and loses everything when the market collapses in 1878. His name commands respect, which unscrupulous operators exploit. They hire him to boost stock prices for worthless properties, trading on his credibility. Eventually, he moves to the Young America mine in Sierra City, California, where he's one of 5 owners who strike it rich again during 5 years of good production. He invests the proceeds in San Francisco real estate. The 1906 earthquake destroys most of his holdings. Philip Deidesheimer dies July 21, 1916 in San Francisco at age 84. The innovation that unlocked hundreds of millions in mineral wealth and employed tens of thousands, given freely to the industry, leaves its inventor neither wealthy nor famous outside mining circles. The National Mining Hall of Fame inducts him posthumously. A 1959 episode of Bonanza fictionalizes his story, but most Americans who know the Comstock lode's name have never heard Deidesheimer's. What really enabled the silver boom? The conventional narrative emphasizes discovery. O'Reilly and McLaughlin digging on Mount Davidson, recognizing the blue-black rock as silver, triggering the rush. That's the spark. The fuel is engineering. Without square-set timbering, the richest ore bodies remain inaccessible. The Ophir's 40-foot-wide chamber at depth. Impossible with pillar and post methods. The Crown Point's Bonanza at 900 feet. Can't be safely extracted without a grid that distributes crushing pressure. The Consolidated Virginia's Big Bonanza, discovered in 1873 at 1,200 feet, extending 700 feet into hanging wall territory. Requires square sets on a scale that consumes entire forests. The technology determines what's mineable, or that's physically reachable but structurally impossible to excavate, has zero value. Deidesheimer converts impossible to difficult, difficult to routine. He industrializes silver extraction by solving the weight-bearing problem that stopped every previous attempt at depth. The numbers tell the story economics drives. Timber costs money, lots of it. Cutting, hauling, fluming, railroading, carpentry wages, installation labor, every board foot represents significant expense. Yet mine operators consume 600 million board feet because the ore's value exceeds the wood's cost by orders of magnitude. At $3,000 per ton, assay values, and 80 tons processed per shift in stamp mills, a single day's operation can justify months of timber investment. The calculation is brutal and simple. Spend whatever the timber costs because leaving silver in the ground costs more. This logic strips 67% of Tahoe's forests in 2 decades. It's not malice, it's math. The market demands silver for currency, for commerce, for the global economy transitioning to bimetallism. The Comstock supplies nearly half of America's silver production during its peak years. That silver is trapped in soft rock under a mountain. The only way to get it out is to build a forest underground. So they do. The myth says the Wild West was won with Colt revolvers and Winchester rifles. The documentary evidence shows it was won with 18 by 18-inch timbers mortised into cubes. The OK Corral gunfight in Tombstone, October 1881, 3 men dead in 30 seconds, is famous because it's dramatic. The Comstock mining operations the same year, extracting tons of ore daily from chambers 1,000 feet deep, supported by square-set grids consuming forests at a rate of millions of board feet monthly. Not famous, not dramatic, absolutely essential. The economic engine of the American West runs on invisible infrastructure. Roads, bridges, smelters, stamp mills, water systems, timber supports. None of it makes good television. All of it makes civilization possible at scale. Deidesheimer's innovation belongs to this category of achievement. Unglamorous, technical, transformative. It doesn't tell itself in a simple story. It requires understanding geology, physics, economics, and industrial systems. Most people prefer the cowboy story. The cowboy story is simpler. It's also less true. Virginia City today is a tourist town of roughly 800 residents, preserved as a National Historic Landmark. The Scholar Mine offers tours through square-set chambers that still stand after 160 years. Visitors walk through the interlocking timber cubes, see the mortised joints, feel the cool air rising from deeper levels still flooded and inaccessible. The timber is Douglas fir, Jeffrey pine, sugar pine, species that once covered the Sierra slopes in dense stands. Some of the square sets still show axe marks where carpenters shaped joints underground by candlelight. Miners carved initials and dates into timbers, graffiti that survives because the wood survives. In sealed sections that later explorers reopened in the 20th century, square-set frameworks remain intact at 800-foot depths, held in perfect stasis by the mountain they're holding up. The reciprocal force, timber presses against rock, rock presses against timber, creates an equilibrium that persists when nothing disturbs it. These chambers represent a snapshot of 1870s industrial engineering, preserved like fossils in stone. They're also tombs. The timber that's still visible in accessible sections is maybe 5% of what went down. The rest stays buried forever, supporting voids that will never again see human beings. That's the deal square-set timbering made possible. Trade forests for silver, trade visibility for stability, trade preservation for extraction. The Comstock mines accepted those terms. So did America. By 1880, production collapses. The ore bodies are playing out. New discoveries become rare. Shafts reach 2,400 feet to then 3,400, eventually 3,800 feet, where the rock temperature climbs to 170 degrees and scalding water floods excavations faster than pumps can handle. The economic calculation reverses. Timber and pumping costs exceed ore values. One by one, the great mines close. The Ophir, the Gould and Curry, the Savage, the Consolidated Virginia, all shut down or reduced to skeleton operations. The last significant ore shipment leaves Virginia City in the 1890s. Some desultory mining continues into the 20th century. The Gold Hill area sees open pit operations in the 1980s, until hot water intrusion stops work. But the boom is over by 1880. Story County's population crashes from 25,000 to 3,500 by 1900. The lumber companies dissolve. The forests don't grow back, not in any time frame that matters to the miners who cut them. Tahoe today is heavily forested again, but the species composition shifted. White fir dominates where Jeffrey pine and sugar pine once thrived. The forest that returned isn't the forest that fell. Ecology doesn't rewind. It adapts and continues forward, usually in diminished form. The real legacy isn't the silver, it's the precedent. Square-set timbering proved that engineering could solve problems that seemed fundamental and unsolvable. Soft rock won't support large chambers. Design a support system that works regardless of rock quality. Ore bodies extend in unpredictable directions. Build modular frameworks that adapt to any geometry. Depth creates crushing pressure. Distribute load across a three-dimensional matrix. Each solution becomes a template for attacking similar problems elsewhere. Modern mining still uses these principles, substituting steel and shotcrete for timber but retaining the conceptual framework. Tunnels under cities, subways, underground storage facilities, particle accelerators, they all inherit something from Deidesheimer's honeycomb insight. The square set wasn't just a mining technique. It was proof that systematic engineering thinking could industrialize extraction from environments hostile to human survival. That proof mattered more than any particular mine's output. Philip Deidesheimer arrived in Nevada Territory in 1860 carrying nothing but German engineering training and a reputation for solving hard problems. He left in his wake an industry transformed, forests destroyed, fortunes created, a state admitted to the Union, and $400 million in silver and gold extracted from rock that everyone agreed was impossible to mine safely. He refused every dollar of patent royalties because he believed the innovation mattered more than his personal enrichment. The mining companies that adopted his system made billions. The lumber companies that fed timber to those mines made millions. Deidesheimer made superintendents' wages and died modestly in San Francisco, his greatest invention so thoroughly integrated into mining practice that most people forgot it needed inventing. That's often how transformative innovations work. They become invisible through success. Nobody thinks about the engineering that holds up the mountain anymore. They think about the silver that came out. They remember the robber barons and the boom towns and the dramatic disasters. They forget the German engineer who looked at a beehive and saw the structure that would let men hollow out a mountain without it falling on their heads. His name survives in mining textbooks and the National Mining Hall of Fame. The square set survives in mines worldwide, adapted and evolved, but fundamentally unchanged. The forests of the Lake Tahoe Basin that disappeared into darkness, never to see sunlight again, those are gone. That's the cost of progress measured in board feet. 600 million of them entombed under Virginia City, holding up chambers where men once swung picks by candlelight, chasing silver through decomposed rock that wouldn't stand on its own. The Comstock lode produced $400 million between 1859 and 1919. Square-set timbering consumed 600 million board feet of Sierra forest. The timber's cost? Roughly $60 million at period lumber prices, 1/7 of the ore value. The innovation that made it possible. Free. Deidesheimer's refusal to patent is the hinge on which the entire Comstock boom turns. Patent fights would have delayed adoption by years, killed miners in collapses, reduced production, concentrated wealth in fewer hands through licensing monopolies. Instead, rapid deployment, standardized practice, accelerated extraction, distributed implementation. The economic multiplier effect is incalculable. That's the paradox of infrastructure innovation. The inventor captures almost none of the value. The system captures all of it. This is why industrial revolutions happen through accumulated unglamorous improvements rather than singular heroic breakthroughs. Deidesheimer understood that. He chose impact over profit. The West got built because enough engineers made that same choice.